On August 16th, 1977, the shocking news of Elvis Presley being found lifeless inside his Graceland mansion spread like wildfire.
Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently, it was a heart attack.
The official story spoke of a sudden heart attack, but what investigators and insiders later uncovered tells a far darker tale. Behind the fame and flashing lights, Elvis was trapped, drowning in prescription pills, crushed by endless shows, and locked in painful loneliness.
I was sitting upstairs with Elvis in his bedroom, and it was one of those nights when there wasn't anybody around and you could feel the loneliness.
His final choices revealed just how far he had fallen from the glory of his prime. What happened inside Graceland wasn't sudden at all. It was a slow, hidden collapse. The final day begins. Elvis Presley's last full day, August 16th, 1977, did not start with excitement. For most people, it was just another day. But for Elvis, there was a restless feeling that pointed to the sad end ahead. Just after midnight, Elvis and his fiancée, Ginger Alden, came back to Graceland from a late dentist visit. A photo was taken of him at about 12:28 in the morning as he and Ginger drove through the gates of Graceland in his Stutz Blackhawk. Later, in the very early morning, around 4 o'clock, Elvis woke his cousin Billy Smith and Billy's wife Jo, asking them to join him and Ginger for a game of racquetball at Graceland. Witnesses said he moved slowly, seemed tired, and was not his usual lively self. At one point, he even hit his leg with the racket and left a bruise. The game ended early. Afterward, Elvis sat at the piano and played a few songs, including gospel music and the tune Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. A lesser-known fact is that Elvis did not sit at the piano and sing Unchained Melody on August 16th. His last confirmed time performing that song was earlier in the summer on June 21st, 1977, at a concert in Rapid City, South Dakota. As the morning passed, Elvis grew uneasy. Friends said he looked worn out and unwell. He could not sleep through the night and kept pacing around the house. On the outside, the day seemed ordinary, with moments of fun and music. But inside, something was breaking. His body, already under great stress, was being pushed too far. And though he tried to hide it, the signs were clear. Slow steps, low energy, and quiet pain. The strain of fame and pressure to perform. In the summer of 1977, Elvis Presley was only 42 years old, but his body told a very different story. He was weak, overweight, and often short of breath. His doctors had already warned him that his health was in serious danger. He suffered from high blood pressure, an enlarged heart, and liver problems caused by years of prescription drug use. Still, despite all of these warnings, Elvis was preparing to go back on tour once again. This was not just a small series of concerts. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had booked him for more than 50 shows in just 3 months. The dates were set, tickets were sold, and the pressure to perform was heavier than ever. For most entertainers, such a schedule would have been tough. For Elvis, in his fragile state, it was nearly impossible. Doctors, family members, and even some members of his band could see he was in no shape to handle the road. Yet, the tour plans continued without pause. Elvis himself still wanted to perform. He loved being on stage and feeding off the energy of his fans. But the truth is, many insiders believe he was no longer doing it for joy. He was doing it out of duty, and because the people around him, especially Colonel Parker, insisted that the show must go on. Colonel Tom Parker had been Elvis's manager since the 1950s. He was often called a genius for the way he turned Elvis into a worldwide superstar. But By the mid-1970s, Parker's decisions were being questioned. Many critics argue that Parker treated Elvis less like a human being and more like a business machine. Parker booked the tours, signed the contracts, and made sure the money kept coming in, no matter the cost to Elvis's health. One of the lesser-known details from this time is that Parker was facing serious personal financial problems of his own. Some insiders believe he had huge gambling debts in Las Vegas. To cover those losses, Parker needed Elvis to keep working non-stop, bringing in millions from concerts, merchandise, and publicity. For Parker, Elvis was the answer to every financial problem. For Elvis, it was a trap. Speculation around Parker's gambling debts and his relentless control of Elvis has grown stronger in recent years. While not every detail can be proven, it is clear that Parker pushed Elvis harder than any doctor would have allowed. Friends described Elvis's schedule as a death sentence. Everyone around him could see the danger, but no one stopped it. The saddest part is that Elvis himself seemed torn. He wanted rest. He needed medical help, but at the same time, he feared disappointing his fans, and he feared Parker's control. His identity as the king of rock and roll depended on being on stage, even when his body could no longer keep up. As the summer tour dates drew closer, Elvis's health grew worse. He canceled rehearsals, spent long hours in bed, and often leaned on heavy doses of medication just to get through the day. His inner circle knew something was very wrong, yet the tour machine kept rolling forward. Looking back, this period shows the crushing strain of fame. Elvis was adored by millions, but he was also trapped by his own legend. He was too famous to quit, too valuable to rest, and too controlled by the people around him to step away. In those final weeks, he was not living like a king. He was working like a product, one that everyone around him depended on, even as it destroyed him. By August of 1977, Elvis's body was breaking down, but his schedule was still packed with shows. It was more than unfair. It was dangerous, and it shows why his final 24 hours were not just an accident of fate. They were the result of years of relentless pressure, bad management, and impossible expectations. Prescription drug abuse. The dark secret. Elvis Presley's last hours were not only marked by illness and stress, but also by a deep dependence on prescription drugs. Medicine quietly became one of the biggest forces in his decline. By the year 1977, Elvis was under the care of Dr. George C. Nicopolis, often called Dr. Nick. Over the years, Dr. Nick gave Elvis many kinds of medicines: sedatives, narcotics, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, amphetamines, and more. Records show that in the first 8 months of 1977 alone, Elvis was given over 10,000 doses by Dr. Nick. After his death, medical examiners found more than a dozen prescription drugs in his body. Some were strong depressants, which slow the body, while others were heavy painkillers. Used together in large or constant amounts, they can strain organs, affect breathing, and weaken the heart. Reports also say that in his last months, Elvis was getting injections many times a day, not just pills, to handle pain and other problems. These details show how serious his struggles had become. Experts now believe Elvis did not simply die from a sudden heart failure. Instead, they say years of using too many prescribed drugs, mixing sedatives with stimulants, and forcing his body to keep performing led to a slow breakdown. Elvis himself did not see this as addiction, because doctors gave him the drugs legally, so he thought they were part of caring for his health. But legal did not mean safe. The huge number of doses, the mix of drugs, and the daily injections proved that dependency had taken over both his days and nights. Isolation inside Graceland. By the middle of the 1970s, Elvis Presley's life at Graceland no longer looked like the bright and glamorous home of the world's biggest star. Instead, the mansion felt more like a prison. Elvis, who once filled stages with energy and charm, now lived almost only at night. He often slept during the day and woke when the sun went down, forcing everyone around him to follow his strange schedule. Staff, friends, and tanchums, even family, stayed ready whenever Elvis wanted company, food, or talk. Graceland stopped being a home and turned into a small world that revolved around him. Inside his private rooms, Elvis created a space that showed his restless mind. One unusual detail was his bedroom setup. Several televisions placed side by side so he could watch 3 channels at once. He flipped between news, sports, and shows, often staying up for hours deep into the night. People close to him said Elvis became obsessed with the news, especially stories about politics, crime, or national scandals. He also loved conspiracy theories and sometimes spoke about powerful people secretly running the world. This constant stream of television made him anxious and unable to sleep. Friends later said he grew more paranoid, fearing the press was spying on him or that strangers might sneak into Graceland. Even though the mansion was private and guarded, Elvis behaved as if danger was always outside the gates. This fear pushed him into deeper isolation. The man who once lived for the stage and the cheers of thousands of fans now hid behind curtains, stepping out only for short bursts of activity. By the morning of August 16, 1977, his isolation had reached its worst point. Elvis was sick, heavy, and dependent on many medicines. But just as painful was the fact that he was truly alone. Surrounded by workers, friends, and even his manager, he still had no one who could really reach him. His world had shrunk to the walls of Graceland. The glow of televisions, late-night racquetball, endless pills, and long nights of pacing the halls when sleep would not come. The bathroom and the collapse. The end came quietly, away from the bright spotlight that had once followed Elvis everywhere. In the very early hours of August 16, 1977, sometime after 2:30 in the morning, Elvis told his fiancée, Ginger Alden, that he was going to the bathroom with a book. According to Ginger, the book he carried was A Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus by Frank O. Adams, a choice that hinted he might have been thinking about faith, life, and death, or perhaps something larger than his daily troubles. Time moved on, and hours passed. By about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ginger woke up and realized Elvis had not returned. She went to check on him and found him lying unresponsive on the bathroom floor. Elvis was face down, his body partly slumped out of a lounge chair that was part of the bathroom and lounge area in Graceland. In shock, Ginger called for help right away, and within moments, others in the house came rushing in: the maid, bodyguards, and his road manager. Yet, even with the rush and the panic, it was already too late. The official timeline says that an emergency call was placed at 2:33 in the afternoon. Paramedics arrived quickly, joined by Dr. George Nikopoulos, Elvis's longtime doctor, who had been treating him for years. They tried to revive him with every tool and effort they had, and then rushed him to Baptist Memorial Hospital. There, despite continued attempts, he was officially pronounced dead at about 3:30 in the afternoon. Some of the details of what happened remain unclear, as witness accounts differ. Certain people believe Elvis may have collapsed suddenly, while others think he might have struggled for hours in the bathroom before he was finally discovered. What is certain is the painful contrast. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, a man loved by millions around the world, spent his last moments in silence, hidden away in a private room inside his own home. The medical findings and cover-up accusations. When Elvis Presley died, the official reason given was a sudden heart attack. But in the years that followed, reports showed this was only part of the truth. Tests proved Elvis had many prescription drugs in his body, including sedatives, painkillers, and tranquilizers, far more than most people would ever take. His longtime doctor, George Dr. Nick Nikopoulos, admitted to giving him thousands of pills each year and was later accused of giving too much medicine, especially in the last 8 months of Elvis's life. One report even showed codeine at about 10 times the safe level. Other drugs found included Valium, Demerol, Quaaludes, and more. Yet at first, officials told the public that drugs played no role, saying his heart had simply stopped. They wanted to protect Elvis's image, since his reputation mattered deeply to fans, the media, and those in charge of his career. Later, experts found Elvis's heart was enlarged, his arteries damaged, and his blood pressure dangerously high. His body was already weak, and adding so many strong drugs was like putting extra weight on a bridge ready to fall. Some family members and insiders believe that more than the image was being protected. They claim Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, worried that the truth would ruin tours, record sales, and the King's legend. There is no legal proof that Parker ordered a cover-up, but the idea has been repeated in interviews and books. Meanwhile, Dr. Nick faced court in 1980, not for causing Elvis's death, but for giving too many drugs. He was found not guilty, but his license was later suspended. In the end, the story told to fans was that Elvis died of natural causes, a heart attack. But the fuller truth showed his body was failing, his heart was broken, and his system was filled with powerful drugs. Some tried to hide the drug part at first, but investigators and doctors knew better. Fans and the aftermath. When Elvis Presley died on August 16th, the news struck the world like a lightning bolt, and fans everywhere were shocked and heartbroken as newspapers and radio stations carried the story for many days, while Memphis, Tennessee, the place Elvis called home, was especially shaken, and people who had never even met him felt as if they had lost someone close. And within only a few hours of his passing, huge crowds began to gather around Graceland, desperate for a glimpse, desperate for something real. And reports say about 25,000 people were outside the gates in those first hours, waiting to pay their respects, or simply to see the king one last time. And the sight was overwhelming, as thousands of people stood there, many visibly upset, many refusing to believe the news was true. And his funeral, when it finally came, drew attention from all over the world, becoming not just a local or even a national event, but a global moment, as celebrities, thousands of fans, and countless reporters came to say goodbye to a man who had meant so much. And for many, the lasting image became Elvis in his casket, his beloved home Graceland, surrounded by mourners in deep grief. And yet less well known is how almost immediately after his death, rumors and mistrust began to grow, with Elvis is alive stories springing up as soon as. People heard he had died, with some claiming he had faked his death to escape the crushing pressure of fame, while others said strange sightings of him in small towns or diners proved he was still alive. Yet many believed these myths came not from any real evidence, but from pain, because the idea that their idol had died alone, ill, and dependent on drugs was too heavy for many fans to accept. And this strange mixture of grief and disbelief shaped his legacy in ways that were unexpected, as fans wanted to hold on to the Elvis they loved. The vibrant performer with unmatched energy, not the broken man he had become. So legends grew and stories spread, with some saying he had retired to a quiet life, and others insisting his death was an illusion. And while these stories were never proven, they still persisted, passed around in interviews, books, and endless late-night conversations, showing how heartbreaking his end truly was, and how it forced many into fantasy, because the truth was simply too painful to face. And in the days after his funeral, the sorrow was clear as letters, flowers, and tears poured in, eyewitnesses recalling fans fainting, crying, and struggling with emptiness because the king was gone. But the world was not ready to let go, and even now, after so many decades, the stories remain as Graceland welcomes visitors from across the globe. Candlelight vigils continue every year, and people tell new versions of old rumors, all reminders not just of his music, but of how deeply he was loved, and how hard the truth still is to accept. The golden thread reveal the far worse truth. The sad truth is this: Elvis Presley did not just die from a sudden heart attack. Investigators later confirmed that his end was the result of many years of neglect, pressure, and a heavy dependence on medicine that no one around him stopped. What happened to him was not quick, but a slow collapse that built up over time until it could not be hidden anymore. Court papers showed a shocking detail. In just 1 year before his death, his doctor, George Nicopolis, often called Dr. Nick, gave him more than 10,000 doses of different drugs. This was not real care or protection for his health. It was a form of control, a way that kept him trapped in a dangerous cycle. Many experts and family members have since said that his death did not have to happen. It could have been prevented if only someone close to him had stepped in with courage. If only someone had treated him like a man in need, instead of a machine built to perform and make money. Elvis was more than the king of rock and roll. He was a human being, full of hopes, fears, and struggles, yet those around him failed to see beyond his fame. This is why his story feels so heartbreaking even now. Fans were not just grieving the death of a music legend. They were also grieving the truth that Elvis Presley was broken down by a system that cared more about profit than about the person he really was. His final 24 hours remind the world that even kings can be destroyed when people treat them like products instead of human beings. Elvis Presley was more than a performer. He was a cultural revolutionary who changed music forever. Yet, in his final 24 hours, the king was no longer untouchable. He was frail, isolated, and failed by those closest to him. Investigators later confirmed the truth was far worse than the official story. Elvis didn't simply die of a heart attack. He was slowly broken down by dependency, exploitation, and neglect. His music still lives, but his story is a warning. Even legends can fall. So we ask, do you remember Elvis as the superstar or the man behind the myth?